When I signed the deed for my 5-acre plot just outside the Briar Glen HOA, I thought I was finally free. No stupid mailbox color codes, no fines for my grass being half an inch too tall, and no angry middle-aged women demanding to inspect my backyard shed. I was wrong. I hadn't even poured the foundation before the HOA's queen bee, Nadine Halbrook, came charging down my gravel road like she owned the county. "Excuse me, this is private road access." "You can't use this," Nadine barked from behind her oversized sunglasses, standing in front of my truck like she was stopping a bank robber. I leaned out my window. "It's a public easement. County records show it's been open since 1961. I did my homework." Nadine scoffed and crossed her arms. "That road runs through HOA land, which means it's subject to HOA review and approval. You can't just build whatever you want and drive through our neighborhood like some wild hermit." "I'm not in your HOA," I said calmly. "The land is zoned agricultural residential. I bought it specifically because it's outside your jurisdiction." She narrowed her eyes like I'd insulted her poodle. "We'll see about that. My name's Carson James. I'm a self-employed electrician who finally saved enough to build my own house. It's been a dream since I was 25, and at 39 I was finally doing it. I picked that land because it was peaceful, had a decent elevation, and most importantly was outside Briar Glen's HOA. I figured the worst I'd have to deal with was a nosy deer or two. I didn't count on Nadine. Within a week of breaking ground, I started getting notices. Not from the city, but from the HOA. Apparently, I was disrupting the visual harmony of the neighborhood by having a construction trailer visible from the road. I ignored them. Then I got a cease and desist letter on Briar Glen letterhead claiming I was trespassing. I went to the county office the next day and confirmed everything again. My access road was legal. The HOA had zero claim on it. I asked the clerk if this kind of thing happened a lot. She laughed. "Oh, if it's the Briar Glen HOA, it's probably Nadine. She's infamous." That night, I came back to my land and found 2 orange cones blocking the access road, along with a laminated sign that read, "No entry private HOA property. Nice try, Nadine." I moved the cones aside, drove right through, and documented everything with time-stamped photos. But I knew I needed more than just phone pictures. So the next morning, I installed a dash cam in my truck and a trail cam facing the entrance. Didn't take long. 2 days later, I caught her on camera dragging a heavy concrete planter right onto the middle of the road. Not only that, she had her husband, some poor guy named Frank, help her set up a fake HOA security sign. They even staked it into the county-owned easement. I emailed it all to the county zoning board. A week passed. Then I came home to find the road completely blocked. This time they brought in a landscaping crew to dump a load of mulch and install a picket fence across the easement. Dead center. My only way in or out. That's when I stopped playing nice. I stood there in the fading light, staring at the white picket fence that had no business being on a public right-of-way. The landscaping company had done a full job: mulch beds on either side, ornamental shrubs, and even a bird bath balanced dead center. The whole thing looked like it belonged in a suburban magazine spread, except it was illegally blocking a public easement I relied on to get to my own land. I pulled out my phone and sent the photos to a contact I'd made at the zoning office. Then I backed my truck into the ditch, used a side path I'd cleared for drainage, and hiked the last 100 yards in with my gear slung over one shoulder. I wasn't about to let Nadine Halbrook win this with landscaping. The next morning, I drove into town and walked into the county courthouse. I asked for a hearing with the land use commissioner and filed a formal complaint. I brought everything: drone footage, timestamps, even receipts showing the landscaping crew had been hired and paid by the Briar Glen HOA. The clerk raised an eyebrow when she saw the size of the file. "This is going to be a mess," she said, "but you're doing this right. You've laid out a very clean paper trail." "I don't want a war," I replied, "just my legal access back." She gave a dry laugh. "Well, You've got one anyway. By the weekend, a notice came down from the county. The HOA had 72 hours to remove all obstructions from the easement or face fines. I showed up that Monday with a representative from the Public Works Department and a sheriff's deputy, just in case. The representative pointed at the fence and scribbled notes. None of this was permitted, not even close. Nadine came marching out, heels clicking on pavement with a man in a golf visor trailing behind her. She waved a folder in our direction. "This land belongs to Briar Glen," she declared. "We have maps, council minutes, and the original subdivision charter." The deputy cut her off. "Ma'am, unless you're planning to contest this in court, I'm going to have to inform you that this is an obstruction of a public easement. The county's already issued a removal order." She narrowed her eyes. "I'll have our lawyers respond." The Public Works rep tapped her clipboard. "You can do that. Meanwhile, we'll be removing this fence in 24 hours if you don't. And you'll be billed." Nadine turned and walked off without another word. The guy in the visor lingered just long enough to mutter something about not being paid enough for this before following her. True to their word, the county crews came the next afternoon with a backhoe and a dump truck. The whole construct fence, shrubs, bird bath, and all was scraped up and carted off in under an hour. I stood off to the side, watching quietly as the road was restored. I figured that might be the end of it, but Nadine wasn't done. 2 days later, I noticed a new sign had gone up, this time at the entrance to the main road leading into Briar Glen. It read, "Private Road. Authorized HOA residents only." Same style as before, same laminated plastic, but this time it wasn't even on her property. It was nailed to a utility pole owned by the city. I made a call. The city's Department of Transportation sent someone out that afternoon. He spent less than 10 minutes inspecting the sign before shaking his head. "This is flat out illegal. We never gave permission for any signage here." He made a note, photographed the sign, and pulled it down himself. I thought that would finally cool things off. But 2 nights later, I heard tires crunching on gravel near my trailer. I stepped out with a flashlight in one hand and my cordless drill in the other. A silver SUV backed out of the access road and sped off. In its place, I found a chain and padlock looped around 2 concrete-filled buckets, blocking the path again. I brought in a bolt cutter and cleared it within minutes. But this time, I wasn't just going to document it. I was done playing defense. The next morning, I filed a police report. I gave them the footage, the vehicle make and model, and even the partial plate I caught on my trail cam. The deputy who took my statement nodded slowly as he looked over the evidence. "This is more than just a nuisance," he said. "Looks like criminal mischief and tampering with public infrastructure. If it's tied to the HOA, they could be liable." I asked if they could do anything more immediate. "Not yet," he said. "But if they try it again and we catch them in the act, it changes everything." So I doubled down. I installed additional motion-activated lights, upgraded to a cellular trail cam that sent images to my phone in real time, and ran a concealed steel cable just beneath the gravel so my own access couldn't be blocked without digging it up entirely. Then I started digging into Briar Glen's HOA financial records. They were technically a nonprofit, and under state law, their budget had to be made publicly available upon request. I submitted mine through the county clerk's office and within a week got access to 3 years of records. That's when I found something interesting: the landscaping company that had been paid to build the illegal fence. They'd been paid from the HOA's general maintenance fund. Not only that, the invoice had been labeled Entry Beautification Main Gate. Except the main gate had never been touched. I contacted 3 Briar Glen residents I'd met during a zoning committee meeting. They weren't fans of Nadine either, and when I told them what I found, they agreed to meet. We gathered at a coffee shop just outside town. I laid out the invoices, the photos, and the county's removal order. "Wait," said one of them, a retired teacher named Alina. "She used HOA dues to build a fence on someone else's land." "Not just that," I said. "She lied about where the money went. The others exchanged glances. "That's fraud," said the third, a guy named Marcus who ran a plumbing business. "We could bring this to the board. Or," I said carefully, "we could bring it to the state attorney general's office." It took them a moment, but they got it. This wasn't just a petty feud anymore. Nadine had used community funds to wage a personal war against a legal resident outside her jurisdiction, and she'd falsified financial records to cover it up. We filed a joint complaint the next week. The AG's office responded quickly. They sent an investigator to interview us, collect documents, and follow up with the county. Within a month, Briar Glen's board received a formal inquiry notice. That's when things spiraled. Several board members quit. A special meeting was called. Word got out that the HOA was under investigation for misuse of funds. Nadine held a meeting at the community center to clarify misunderstandings. I showed up. So did Alina, Marcus, and about 30 other residents, some angry, some curious, all tired of being dragged into someone else's vendetta. Nadine stood at the podium, her voice strained but composed. "There has been a great deal of misinformation spread by individuals who don't even live in this community. That individual has more evidence than your treasurer," someone called from the back. I stepped forward. "The only misinformation here is what you wrote on an invoice to cover up an illegal obstruction of public land." She went pale. I handed the investigator's letter to the vice president of the board. "You might want to read this before the state steps in and does it for you." The room erupted in murmurs. Nadine stared at me, lips pressed tight, but she didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The board voted 2 days later to suspend her pending the outcome of the investigation. She was stripped of all administrative access, and a third-party auditing firm was brought in to review every transaction from the last 5 years. As for me, my road stayed clear. The county installed official signage marking it as a public easement, and within weeks, the city added a surveillance camera at the entrance for good measure. I finally poured the foundation for my house in peace, but that wasn't the end of Nadine's problems, not by a long shot. 3 weeks after Nadine was suspended, I noticed something odd during a supply run. At the hardware store's entrance was a corkboard where contractors posted job listings, tool rentals, and local events. Taped in the middle was a flyer with Briar Glen's logo on it. Above the emblem, in bold red letters, it read, "Community Alert. Suspicious construction activity near HOA border, please report any unauthorized work." It didn't name me directly, but my property was the only one bordering their development. The flyer listed a contact number, the same office line Nadine used before her suspension. I tore it down and brought it straight to the county code enforcement office. The clerk there, a guy named Devin I hadn't met before, raised his eyebrows. "They're not just doubling down," he said. "They're trying to build a case from rumors. This wasn't cleared through any official channel." I asked if it was enough to reopen the investigation. He shook his head. "The AG's already looking into misuse of funds." But if they're using official HOA branding to harass someone outside their jurisdiction, that drifts into criminal territory impersonation of authority. Devin made a copy of the flyer and passed it on to the investigator assigned to the case. I thought that might put a lid on things, but it only stirred up more. That same evening, I got a message from Alina. She sounded rattled. "They mailed out a newsletter," she said. "It claims you're planning a commercial development, that you're going to bring traffic, noise, and possibly lower property values. People are getting nervous." I thanked her and told her I'd take care of it. The next morning, I paid a visit to a man named Jonah Lindell, a retired municipal judge who lived 2 streets into Briar Glen. He'd spoken up at the HOA meeting, but until now, he'd kept his distance. When I rang his doorbell, he answered with a look of quiet suspicion. I introduced myself and handed him a copy of the flyer and the newsletter. "I'm not building a strip mall," I said. "I'm finishing a house." This is slander, plain and simple. Jonah, read both documents carefully. They're banking on fear. People around here panic if you say the word commercial zoning. You were a judge, I said. Could this cross the line into defamation? Not if it's vague, he said. But if they knowingly spread falsehoods with intent to damage your reputation or property value, that's actionable, especially if it can be tied to someone still acting on behalf of the HOA. He paused, then added, "Would you be willing to speak at the next open forum?" I agreed. He sent word to the interim board chair that I'd be attending. Meanwhile, I retained a local attorney not for lawsuits yet, but to keep things clean. Her name was Dana Morales, and she specialized in civil disputes and HOA law. After reviewing the materials, she said, "They're walking into a minefield. If any current board member is helping Nadine, they're exposing the HOA to joint liability. That flyer alone. You could file a restraining order based on harassment." I asked her to hold off not because I was backing down, but because I wanted something bigger than a court order. I wanted exposure, and I was about to get it. The open forum drew a larger crowd than usual. Residents filtered in with lawn chairs, coffee thermoses, and folding clipboards. A few glanced at me curiously, others avoided eye contact. When Jonah introduced me, the room was quiet. I stepped up to the podium and held up the newsletter. I've been accused of building a commercial structure. I'm not. I submitted my plans to the county months ago. Single-family residence, agricultural zoning, no variances requested. You can verify it yourself. A man near the front raised a hand. Then why are there delivery trucks coming in and out all week? I'm wiring my well system, I answered. Entrenching for solar backup. I hire subcontractors. They leave when the work's done. That's it. Another resident, a woman in a denim jacket, folded her arms. Why'd Nadine say you were putting in a storage facility? I don't know, I said, but I can show you my permits. And I can show you the county's letter confirming I'm outside your HOA. They have no authority over me and no right to use your dues to harass me. At that, murmurs rippled through the crowd. I paused, then added, but it gets worse. Those flyers being posted in town. They weren't approved by the board, yet they bear the HOA's seal. That's impersonation of an official body. It's illegal. That got their attention. Jonah stood. I've reviewed the materials. If any current or former board member authorized those without a vote, they may have committed fraud. And they've exposed this community to serious legal risk. The room fell silent. Then Marcus stood and asked the question I'd been hoping for. Do we know if Nadine's still involved behind the scenes? That cracked the dam. Several residents began speaking at once. Someone had seen her meeting with the treasurer. Another mentioned a private Facebook group where she was still posting updates on behalf of the board. Jonah called for order and promised a formal inquiry. I left the meeting without saying another word. 2 days later, Dana called me with news. The AG's office is expanding their investigation. Apparently, one of the auditors found a second set of books. There's evidence of off-the-record payments, some of which match the landscaping company used to block your access road. My stomach tightened. So they were hiding transactions. Looks that way. And now the AG's bringing in the county prosecutor. It escalated fast. Subpoenas were issued. The treasurer resigned abruptly. A warrant was obtained to search the HOA's storage unit where they kept old records. Inside, investigators found a stack of handwritten receipts, including one signed by Nadine, authorizing a cash payment to a private security contractor. That contractor, it turned out, had been paid to monitor road access incursions. The date matched the night. I caught the silver SUV on my camera. Dana met with the prosecutor's office and provided them with the full compilation of my trail cam clips, dash cam footage, and recorded statements. Within a week, an arrest warrant was issued for Nadine Halbrook. She was charged with falsifying public documents, misappropriation of HOA funds, and criminal conspiracy to obstruct lawful land use. The news hit the local paper like a lightning strike. Former HOA president arrested in financial misconduct probe, the headline read. Meanwhile, the interim board voted to dissolve all committees Nadine had formed and suspended the HOA's discretionary spending until the audit was complete. Residents were furious not just about the money, but about being lied to for years. Jonah called me shortly after the arrest. "You did this the right way," he said. "You didn't just fight back, you exposed the whole rot." "I just wanted to build my house," I said. "And in the process," he replied, "you might have saved this community from bankrupting itself." As for Nadine, she was released on bail pending trial, but the damage was done. Her name was stripped from every newsletter, every committee roster, and every plaque in the community center. Her once loyal followers kept their heads down, hoping to avoid being pulled into the fallout. I finally finished my roof installation that same week. For the first time since I bought the land, I stood on my porch and looked out over the ridge without checking for roadblocks or signs. Peace had returned, not just to my property, but to the neighborhood that tried to push me out. But I had a feeling the story wasn't entirely over yet. The first big rain of the season rolled through a week after Nadine's arrest. I was sitting inside the nearly finished shell of my house, listening to the steady drumming on the roof and checking the voltage on my solar inverters when my phone buzzed. The caller ID was unfamiliar, but the voice on the other end introduced himself as Officer Braden from the county's Financial Crimes Unit. He was brief. The investigation had turned up banking records that suggested someone else had been withdrawing HOA funds under a fake vendor name, one that didn't match any of the companies I'd dealt with. The activity spanned almost 2 years. "She wasn't working alone," Braden said. "This thing's wider than we thought." I asked what that meant for me. "Nothing directly. But we might need you to testify about how the funds were used to target you, if it goes to trial." The line went quiet after that. I spent the rest of the week tying up loose ends around the property. The well pump was stable, the perimeter lights were working, and the final electrical inspection passed without a hitch. It should have been a calm stretch. But then, just after dusk on Thursday, something set off the motion alerts on the east side of the property. I checked my phone. The cellular cam snapped a shot of a blurred figure near the tree line. Too far to ID, but close enough to trigger the IR sensor. I grabbed my flashlight and walked the ridge. The rain had softened the ground, and sure enough, there were fresh boot prints leading up from the creek that separated my land from the rear of Briar Glen's main walking trail. I followed the tracks until they stopped near an old fence post, one of mine. The top had been snapped clean off. A piece of it lay half buried in the mud, marked with red spray paint. Next morning, I called Dana. "They're scouting the property line," I said. "I think someone's planning a retaliation." She didn't hesitate. "Then we file for a civil protection boundary order. If anyone from Briar Glen so much as sets foot across your line again, it becomes criminal trespass." By Friday afternoon, the order was in place. A surveyor from the county came out, posted official markers, and logged the GPS coordinates into the database. I paid extra to have ground stakes installed every 10 yards, just to be sure. The same day, the prosecutor's office made an announcement. The investigation had expanded to include 3 former board members and their spouses. They were being charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, deliberate mismanagement of nonprofit funds, and tampering with public records. It turned out the fake vendor account was linked to the husband of the HOA's former treasurer. He'd been submitting invoices for consulting services and cashing the checks through a shell company registered to a P.O. box in the next county over. The total theft exceeded $80,000. Nadine's obstruction campaign against me had been the final straw. Her personal vendetta had pulled the curtain back on years of shady bookkeeping. The county held a town hall meeting the following week, this time at the public library, far from Briar Glen's community center. I was asked to attend not as a speaker, but as an example of how unchecked power could spiral when no one paid attention. The meeting was packed. Local journalists, city planners, and even 2 state representatives showed up. What started as a zoning case had turned into a lightning rod for HOA reform. After the speakers wrapped up, one of the state reps approached me. "You've got a weird kind of fame now," she said. "But you also uncovered something we've been seeing more of. Small associations with no oversight and a lot of money." I asked what could be done. "Legislation," she said. "More transparency, mandatory audits, and accountability. What happened to you? That shouldn't be possible." I left the meeting thinking about something I hadn't considered before. I'd fought for the right to build my home, but maybe there was more to it. Now maybe this land had become the line in the sand for something bigger. The following weekend, a demolition crew arrived at Briar Glen. Not to tear down homes, but to remove the last of the illegal structures Nadine had ordered built. A stone sign near the entrance that falsely claimed private road status was jackhammered apart while residents watched from their porches. A maintenance shed built on disputed land was quietly dismantled before dawn. A few days later, a leaner called. "They've appointed a new board," she said. "Jonah's in as interim president. First motion passed. Annual third-party audits, second. No more discretionary spending without a full community vote." I congratulated her and asked how the community was taking it. "They're embarrassed," she said, "but relieved. Nadine had her claws in everything." Another week passed, then the trial date was announced. I was called to testify. Not just about the road obstruction or the fence, but about the pattern of harassment that started the whole thing. Dana walked me through prep. She said the prosecution was going to focus on intent, how Nadine and her co-defendants didn't just misuse funds, but weaponize them. The courtroom was packed when I took the stand. Nadine sat stiffly with her lawyer, her expression unreadable. The prosecutor walked me through each instance. The sign on the utility pole, the landscaping crew, the fake security contractor. "Did the defendant ever have legal authority over your property?" he asked. "No," I said. "Not then." "Not ever. And were you ever notified of any legitimate HOA complaint filed through a court or zoning board?" "Never." When I stepped down, I caught a glimpse of Jonah seated behind the prosecution table. He gave a subtle nod. A few members of the gallery clapped before the bailiff told them to stop. The trial lasted 5 days. It ended with 3 guilty verdicts and 2 plea deals. Nadine was sentenced to 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, and a court-ordered ban from holding any future leadership role in a nonprofit. But the biggest blow came in the form of restitution. The court ordered her and the other defendants to repay every misused dollar, nearly $100,000 in total. Failure to do so would result in civil liens against their properties. I didn't celebrate. I just went home and got back to work. The siding went up, the interior walls were finished, and the first coat of paint dried in the same week the county paved the final section of my access road. Not gravel paved. The zoning committee approved the upgrade as a gesture of goodwill. When I finally moved in, I hosted a small barbecue. Jonah came. So did Alina, Marcus, and a few of the zoning officers who helped me through the red tape. Nobody mentioned the fight. They didn't need to. As the sun dipped behind the ridge, I walked the line of my property, quiet, sturdy, fully mine, and stopped at the place where the fence used to be. There was nothing left of it now. Just a clean stretch of road and a line of freshly planted native grass. Nadine never tried to contact me again. Her house went up for sale 6 weeks after the sentencing. I didn't ask where she went. Briar Glen changed after that. The new board made transparency their mission. Residents were invited to monthly budget reviews. The bylaws were rewritten. A community mediator was brought in for disputes, and the HOA's power was trimmed back to basics. Trash pickup, park maintenance, and mailbox keys. No more secret committees. No more unauthorized crackdowns. Sometimes I'd see folks from the neighborhood walking their dogs near the edge of my land. Nobody crossed the line. They waved, I waved back, and that was it. They finally understood what I had tried to from the beginning. I wasn't the outsider. I was the reason it got better.